Hey, it's shawnshawn here, the artist behind shawnshawn.co, and I do specials on eBay. Today I'm going to review Hunter Killer. So this is kind of a really fun movie. Has an American captain with Gerard Butler, who is in 300, and he's a brand new captain. And he gets the call to go check out this submarine that's been attacked, and so he goes over, checks out the submarine, and there's some kind of foul play going about, which is this rogue defense minister in Russia. He kidnaps the Russian president and he's trying to overthrow the government and start a war with the U.S. to solidify his power. And so he's sent in to kind of scout out and save the Russian president, which is no news. It's all in the marketing. So it has a really fun story plot. They have some ideas which, only with Hollywood, like they have an extra sub on top of the sub, which I went and checked, and no U.S. sub has an attached sub. So this is kind of, it works as a plot device as far as transitioning, say, the SEAL team from the sub to the mini sub and then off and then back and forth. So it's kind of an interesting plot thing as far as they need it because they're rescuing a sub from the bottom of the ocean, which you couldn't do with the normal submarines. So they had this fake sub that they have, and they can just attach to another sub. And so it's a plot device, but considering it's not the reality of submarines, it's kind of like that creates issues, I think, in the believability of the plot, which creates issues in the story. Another issue that they have is on the SEAL team, in a pretty good, believable training, but they parachute down, they land, and then they're swimming, and they have all these tanks and stuff. But on the way down, you see them carrying guns, but you don't see them carrying the tanks. So you're like, where did the tanks come from? Like they have these backpacks, but maybe they had the equipment in there, but it looks like maybe it's too small. Like you could believe there's ammunitions and maybe a tent, but did they have a tank in there? Maybe they did. Who knows? Anyway, did a good job as far as a believability of the SEALs. They have some really nice surprises. The SEALs are almost going to get captured and then they get saved. There's always like really nice plot twists. It's a really fast moving movie, I'd say. It's only 2 hours and a minute. And considering all the ground they covered, like they have a whole character development of the Department of Defense. They have an NSA agent. They have the president of the U.S. They have the Russian president. They have this rogue minister, all his staff, the president's staff. So quite a few characters involved. The SEAL team and also the whole submarine team. So there's quite a lot of ground to cover with only 2 hours. They probably could have stretched it a little bit, but I feel like the runtime is really nicely tight. So they didn't really overstretch it, which I think is good. But maybe I think one of the things it falls a little bit short is in the believability of the submarine training. So if you don't know, in submarines, especially when you're at war footing, which these guys are, they're DEFCON 2 when they get thrown into battle, and they're going to land in a Russian submarine base, which is totally implausible. But obviously, if you're in that scenario, you would be like, if you read anything about the history of submarine warfare, when they have these ladders and they go up and down, they actually slide down the ladders, and everyone slides down the ladder. Maybe the captain doesn't because he's older, so that probably is believable. But the whole, all these guys that are 18 to 20, they'd be just sliding down these ladders, and they don't have that in the film. So that, I think if they would have trained maybe 3-4 weeks in these submarines and just drilled them like you would in a real submarine, the acting would have came off a little stronger as far as the submarine crew. So that could have been improved, I think. The SEAL team comes off pretty strong. They come up pretty believable as far as, they parachute and they land and they get their guns and they go in the submarine. They look fairly well, and I think some of these guys were on Zero Dark 30 maybe, so they had some SEAL training and stuff, so they look believable as SEALs, so that's really important. Maybe not as good as Zero Dark 30. That really was like, wow, you see the SEAL Team 6 and you're like, damn, these guys are hardcore. These guys look pretty believable, good enough for a movie. The Russians, I think, were pretty good as far as the Russian defense minister and his strive to power. It's not really clear why he wants to overthrow the president, so maybe they should have had a little bit of backstory there, but not exactly necessary to be a villain. The Russian president seems okay as far as playing the Russian president. I think he's okay. I mean, he's obviously not Putin, so to be like if a moderate came after Putin maybe, and then this guy, Russian leader decided to take over, that's kind of a Putin style character, so maybe that's believable. But yeah, the Russian submarine captain, and he didn't come off as really well done. If you look at like the gold standard, probably The Hunt for October with Sean Connery, and he really nails that. Like boom, he feels Russian. He has like the accent. And this guy didn't have much of an accent. He does speak some Russian, so that's believable, but he doesn't have this Russian accent. Not that you have to have it, but it really kind of gives a feel, because the captain probably wouldn't have as much exposure to Western culture to have a really good accent. Like if you were a ground, army guy, you could be listening all the time, be really good, and have a really good American accent for your English, but if you're in a submarine, you're literally months inside this box speaking Russian. Your English is going to be pretty crap, right? So they should have had probably a pretty strong Russian accent. So I would have changed that. And he just didn't come off that badass. I mean, obviously he's coming out of a submarine. He's stranded on the bottom of the ocean, almost drowned. So he's shooken up. But, he didn't exactly come off as that believable. I think he's a good actor, but somehow it didn't fit the role as well, like compared to Sean Connery. The other thing that's really strange as far as the acting choice was they have this NSA member who kind of works with the Department of Defense, and they're kind of leading it. She comes in and say, hey, you can use our satellites and all this stuff, but she's like a junior member. She looks like she's in her 30s. Someone in the 30s going to make all those shots? Like, come on, man. They're going to be in their 50s or 60s. That doesn't read right. It's fine if it's a woman, but it's just having a really young person, and they're supposed to represent the whole NSA. I mean, I understand you don't want to develop a whole nother NSA side of the house and all that. That would have just been it would have been a 3-hour movie, right, to add. So you have to have kind of a point person. But just the way that works kind of doesn't work for me. It's a plot device, but it just falls flat. Another really funny part is they use a female president. So obviously when they were filming this, it was probably right, like the casting in the original sense was probably right before the elections. And obviously at that point, most people thought Hillary Clinton was probably a shoo-in. No one suspected that Trump would have been president. And I think that's reasonable. But also, it depends when they filmed it. Maybe they filmed it later, so they didn't want to recast to a male. So maybe in that aspect, you kind of seen the Hollywood bias maybe towards the Democrats. But, all in all, it doesn't really matter if it's a male or female. It depends whether they're believable. And she does play reasonably well for Hillary Clinton. She does look a lot younger than Hillary Clinton, I'd say. But she has some of the same jackets and stuff, so that's pretty fun. But again, it kind of shows like maybe the bias that, Hollywood obviously is known to be a lot more liberal than Republican. So, it could have been their own bias of thinking that she would have won, kind of played into this. But all in all, it still works as a plot. And they have quite a lot of few plot twists in the film, so it's going to be really fun. It's a really fast ride. Yeah, I think it's pretty enjoyable. They just have some really weird things in it, like submarine training could have been better. This baby sub on top of the sub, it doesn't exist in reality. So they needed it for the plot, but it doesn't make sense for real. It's like use what you really have. I would say that you get yourself in trouble with that. I think they should have trained more on the submarine too. That would have made more sense. But overall, it's a fun movie. Hopefully you guys like it. Give me a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe below. And hope to see you in the next movie.